In the early 1st millennium BC, the Mycenaean civilization, the once glorious culture of Bronze Age Greece, lay in ruins. A mysterious collapse swept through the region, and the once mighty palaces were abandoned, trade routes vanished, and literacy disappeared into darkness. Into this chaotic vacuum entered the Dorians, a rugged group from northern Greece. Among them were the ancestors of the Spartans, who conquered the region of Laconia and settled in what would become one of history's most feared and admired city-states, Sparta. Amid the turbulence of early Spartan development emerged a figure whose name became etched into legend, Lycurgus, the Lawgiver of Sparta. Although historians debate the exact time of his life and whether he existed as one man or a composite of several reformers, most ancient sources place him in the early 8th century BC, near the end of the Greek Dark Ages. The Greece of this era was torn by violence, tribalism, and instability. Sparta was no different, gripped by lawlessness, internal strife, and power struggles. It was during this time that Lycurgus stepped into history, not as a king hungry for power, but as a man burdened with vision and a desire to forge order out of chaos. He was the younger brother of King Polydex, one of the two hereditary monarchs of Sparta, for Sparta was unique in that it was ruled by two royal families simultaneously, a diarchy that set it apart from the monarchies of other Greek cities. When King Polydex died without a known heir, the crown seemed poised to pass to Lycurgus. But when it was discovered that Polydex's wife was pregnant, Lycurgus made a decision that would define his character forever. He publicly declared that if the child was male, the boy would be king, and he himself would serve only as regent. The child, named Gerousia, was born a boy. True to his word, Lycurgus ruled only temporarily, maintaining the throne in trust for his infant nephew. Yet noble intentions rarely escape the poison of politics. Rumors began to circulate, whispered by the queen mother and ambitious nobles, that Lycurgus intended to murder the boy and seize power for himself. Rather than incite bloodshed or tarnish his name, Lycurgus chose voluntary exile. He left Sparta and traveled across the ancient world in search of wisdom, political knowledge, and divine insight. His journey took him to Crete, where he observed the structure of Dorian law, and to Egypt, where the concept of separating warriors from tradesmen left a strong impression. He traveled as far as India, according to some accounts, where he saw how law and order were embedded in society through strict customs. These experiences would become the foundation upon which he would build a revolutionary Spartan society, one based not on wealth or luxury, but on discipline, equality, and military excellence. After years of travel and observation, Lycurgus began to receive urgent messages from Sparta, where society had once again descended into unrest. The regency had ended, but the city now begged for the guidance of a visionary. Before returning to his homeland, Lycurgus made a sacred pilgrimage to the Oracle of Delphi, seeking divine confirmation of his purpose. The oracle declared that his prayers had been heard and that the city which followed his laws would become the most glorious in all of Greece. Emboldened by this prophecy, Lycurgus returned to Sparta, not as a king or conqueror, but as a reformer. Now an adult, King Gerousia welcomed his uncle with honor, realizing that Lycurgus harbored no ambitions for the throne. With royal blessing and divine endorsement, Lycurgus began the process of restructuring the very soul of Sparta. He abolished all written laws and instead ordered every Spartan citizen to memorize the Constitution, which became known as the Great Retro. This oral constitution was not merely a legal code, it was a way of life. The heart of Lycurgus' reforms was equality. He believed that inequality led to greed, corruption, and war. Therefore, he redistributed land so that every citizen had an equal share, eliminating the concentration of wealth that had plagued other Greek cities. He also banned the use of gold, silver, and bronze as currency, replacing them with iron rods, so large and cumbersome that no one could accumulate them in great quantities or use them for foreign trade. By making Spartan currency unappealing to outsiders, Lycurgus ensured the city would remain economically self-sufficient and unaffected by the luxurious temptations of the outside world. In politics, Lycurgus preserved the dual kingship but introduced two critical balancing institutions. First was the Gerousia, a council of 28 elder aristocrats, each over the age of 60, who acted as advisors and judges. Second was the Ephorate, a body of 5 senior magistrates elected annually by the citizens. The Ephors held equal power to the kings and oversaw civil discipline, education, and even military decisions. This unique balance of power created a society where monarchy, aristocracy, and limited democracy coexisted. The only office open to all male Spartan citizens was the popular assembly, which elected the Ephors and could approve or reject laws. But the most radical and enduring of Lycurgus' reforms were not in politics or economy, they were in the fabric of Spartan life itself. He introduced the agoge, a brutal and disciplined state-run education system that trained boys from age 7 to 30 in the arts of warfare, survival, rhetoric, and sacrifice. Boys were taken from their families, placed in communal barracks, and taught through pain, hunger, and endurance. Stealing food was encouraged, to build cunning, but being caught resulted in severe beatings. Plutarch tells of a boy who stole a fox and hid it under his cloak. When discovered, the boy had already died from the fox tearing into his flesh, but he had remained silent, choosing death over dishonor. This was the Spartan ideal: strength without complaint, obedience without hesitation, courage without weakness. Sparta's new society, sculpted by Lycurgus, was built like a pyramid. At the top were the Spartiates, the full Spartan citizens and warriors who had graduated from the agoge. They alone had the right to vote, hold office, and participate in the military elite. Their lives were defined by duty and discipline. Below them were the perioikoi, non-citizen free men who worked as craftsmen, traders, and manufacturers. They lived around Sparta and were allowed to travel freely, but could not vote or own land within the city. At the bottom were the helots, the enslaved population made up of conquered peoples, particularly from Messenia. The helots were state-owned serfs, forced to farm and provide food for the Spartan military class. Their lives were marked by constant fear and humiliation. The helots were so despised and feared by the Spartans that they were annually declared enemies of the state. A secret police force called the Cryptia was tasked with terrorizing them. The most promising young Spartans were sent on covert missions to assassinate any helot deemed too bold or strong-willed. According to Plutarch, this institution was so cruel and inhumane that even he, an admirer of Spartan discipline, referred to it as a grave injustice. But from Lycurgus' perspective, such harsh measures were essential for maintaining the fragile balance of a society built on enforced unity. He recognized the inherent danger of a powerful underclass and believed fear was the only method to prevent rebellion. The Spartan system was thus both brilliant and brutal. Even women in Sparta lived under the influence of Lycurgus' reforms. Unlike elsewhere in Greece, Spartan women received formal education, participated in athletic contests, and were legally permitted to own land. Lycurgus believed that strong mothers produced strong warriors. Therefore, girls were trained in physical fitness through javelin, discus, running, and wrestling. Childbirth was considered their battlefield, and women were honored when they gave birth to sons who became warriors. In fact, Spartan women eventually came to own 2/3 of Sparta's agricultural land, thanks to inheritance laws that favored them during wartime casualties. Another of Lycurgus' innovations was the Syssitia, communal dining halls where Spartiates ate together every evening, regardless of social status or personal wealth. The food was notoriously bland, designed to maintain leanness and athleticism. Overweight citizens were publicly shamed and could even lose their rights. No luxury, no comfort, no selfishness. Spartan life was to be lived for the city alone. Even marriage and family were structured around the needs of the state. Husbands could visit their wives only at night and were expected to remain in barracks until age 30. All of these customs were intended to build absolute loyalty to Sparta, forge unshakable bonds among warriors, and eliminate all distractions from military perfection. Once his reforms were fully enacted, Lycurgus knew that his vision required more than just laws, it required unbreakable commitment. Fearing that future generations might undo his work, he summoned every Spartan, including the kings, to take a sacred oath. They swore to uphold the laws of Lycurgus until he returned from a final journey. With the promise secured, Lycurgus once again journeyed to Delphi. There, the oracle reaffirmed that Sparta would flourish so long as his laws remained unbroken. And with that, Lycurgus made the ultimate sacrifice. He starved himself to death, ensuring that he would never return. His people, bound by oath, were left with no excuse to revoke the constitution. Through his death, he ensured his laws lived forever. What followed was one of the most awe-inspiring eras in ancient history. The Spartan military system, the social structure, and political institutions created by Lycurgus transformed a city-state into a military juggernaut. Sparta became the nucleus of Greek resistance against Persia during the Persian invasions, most famously at the Battle of Thermopylae under King Leonidas. It dominated the Peloponnesian League, led Greek armies, and even invaded Persian lands in Asia Minor. For centuries, the name Sparta evoked fear, respect, and envy. Unlike Athens, which celebrated philosophy and art, Sparta's soul was forged in steel and fire, because one man dreamed of order greater than himself. Lycurgus' memory lived not in temples or statues but in every act of Spartan discipline. Even centuries later, Roman writers and Christian historians marveled at the city he created. His system was harsh, but it worked. It was inhuman to many, but divine to those who lived it. Through visionary leadership, unwavering conviction, and unparalleled wisdom, Lycurgus turned chaos into order, fear into discipline, and a small city into one of history's most legendary civilizations. He remains a symbol of uncompromising law, fierce patriotism, and the power of a single man to change the course of an entire nation.